Americans want a balanced budget amendment, and that's what the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act was all about.
All right, we're here with Senator Mike Lee, who's a freshman senator of Utah and also author of the brand new book, The Freedom Agenda, Why a Balanced Budget Amendment is Necessary to Restore Constitutional Government. First off, Senator, thank you for joining Human Events for an interview.
Thank you.
I got to start off with Barack Obama. He recently said, and you observed this in an op-ed you wrote for Politico, that the next 16 months, this is Barack Obama saying, leading up to the election, America will have a clear choice to debate our respective visions for America. I'm guessing you want this debate. This is a fight you want on the respective visions of where the country has to go. Absolutely,
and I agree with the president in this regard. There are two visions. One vision proceeds from the understanding that we ought to keep current spending levels where they are now or expand them. And the other vision says, in order to preserve the government programs that we've come to rely on, we need to bring spending under control. We need to avoid this practice of perpetual deficit spending. We need permanent structural reform to the way we spend money in Washington.
Is Obama dangerous for the country?
Well, one person can't be dangerous to the country. That's the beauty of the constitutional system that we have. His worldview is one that I generally disagree with, his view of the proper role of the government. So I outlined those two main points that will be emphasized in the debate. He tends to focus on the first point, which is keep government spending where it is now or expand it, and I say exactly the opposite. Because every time we expand our debt, every time we expand our borrowing, as we did recently, setting aside the issue of a credit downgrade, which we received shortly after we raised the debt limit by an unprecedented almost $2.5 trillion, separate and apart from that, we face this growing problem of the fact that we're getting closer and closer to the point where we'll be paying $1 trillion a year just in interest. Some say that point is 10 years away. Others, myself included, say that we could be at that point sooner than that if we're not careful. But that regardless of when we get there, if we don't do anything to change it, then we'll be in a position where every federal program, from defense to entitlements, will be placed in jeopardy. That's why I point out in my book, The Freedom Agenda, that whether you're a Democrat and a liberal and you're most concerned about protecting entitlements, or if you're a conservative Republican and you're most concerned about protecting defense programs, regardless of where you fit on that spectrum, you should want a balanced budget amendment.
When you hear Harry Reid blast the balanced budget amendment, or any restraint of government really, as the worst piece of legislation ever, and you see, and he sees, the fiscal calamity we're heading, or we're already in, do you wonder what planet he's on?
Well, you know, everyone's entitled to a mulligan now and then. I suspect there are some things that he says from time to time that he might later regret. We've all been there. I don't think he really meant that this was the worst piece of legislation he's ever seen. If he did, then I strongly disagree with him. And if it really was the worst piece of legislation he ever saw, you would think that he would have allowed it to come up for an open debate, discussion, and amendment process. That's not what happened. He and his colleagues voted to table it without giving it any chance for a full airing. This is what the American people want, overwhelmingly, by a margin of 75%, according to a source no more conservative than CNN. Americans want a balanced budget amendment, and that's what the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act was all about, was putting a balanced budget amendment in place, getting it proposed by Congress before we raise the debt limit.
There's a narrative that's building, and it has been built in the media and amongst liberals, that the Tea Party freshmen in Congress specifically, they do not want to compromise, and we have to compromise moving forward to solve the country's mess. What's your response to that?
Compromise isn't a solution. Compromise isn't an end outcome. It is a process, and it's a process that's inevitable. The question isn't whether compromises will occur along the way toward adopting any piece of legislation. It's where they will occur. So it's not a solution to say you have to compromise. The question is where you're willing to. And what I've said, what I intended to do by introducing the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act was to introduce opportunities for compromise. To say, as long as we have a balanced budget amendment and some statutory spending caps and some immediate cuts, then I'm willing to pursue this idea of raising the debt limit. But we do have to have those things. There are some things that are not subject to compromise. Everything else is.
What would be those items that you won't compromise on? That this is a first principle and you have to move forward regardless of what the left is saying.
I've told my constituents since even before I was sworn into office that I would oppose efforts to raise the debt limit until Congress proposes and submits to the states for ratification a balanced budget amendment. That's not a subject on which I will compromise. I will not retreat from that one.